Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany.
To begin, the White House National Security Council spokesperson said this afternoon that Israel is not responsible for the hospital explosion in Gaza. Tuesday, Hamas has said Israel is responsible from the outset. What direct evidence should observers be looking for to determine who is responsible?
I don't know what else is needed for anybody in the free democratic world if two sovereign states say that Israel isn't responsible and one terrorist organization claims the otherwise. I don't really know that there's a contest and really a dilemma who to believe. But if people are inclined and they want, then yes, we have presented clear and live and verified intelligence and evidence that proves that this wasn't an Israeli strike and that it was in fact a rocket that misfired. The rocket was fired from Gaza towards Israeli civilians, but then it misfired just after being launched. Unfortunately, landed in the parking lot of that hospital in Gaza and caused those casualties. Sadly, this has been used and manipulated by Hamas, and all too many media outlets have been willfully playing along with taking and parroting the Hamas narrative before checking it, before verifying it, and without the necessary caution. And I think that is reckless journalism.
And now we know that Hamas uses human shields. For example, they have their bases inside schools and hospitals. Now, regardless of who is behind this attack, realistically, can the IDF avoid civilian casualties? Like
any military at war, and especially in urban terrain, unfortunately, I don't think that civilian casualties can be totally avoided. We try to minimize them. We try to not to strike civilian infrastructure. We focus our military activities only on the military assets of Hamas. But unfortunately, since our enemies are embedded within the civilian infrastructure, since they use civilian houses and buildings and schools and mosques and hospitals for their fighting, and by the way, we cannot rule out that the very abnormal large amount of casualties from the hospital explosion could be related to something that Hamas was storing underneath or nearby the hospital. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand how so many people were killed by the remains of one rocket. But the bottom line is, we fight according to the laws of armed conflict. Our enemy is Hamas, not the civilians. And we will defeat Hamas while trying as much as possible to minimize casualties.
And on that note, when Hamas reports these casualty numbers, according to IDF intelligence, how credible are those numbers?
Extremely doubtful at best. And there is a long documented history of Hamas, the so-called Gaza Health Ministry, which is the Hamas Health Ministry, doctoring numbers and mostly focusing on embedding combatants and transforming them into teenagers or just men of a certain military age that died while they were peacefully in their homes, and all kinds of other lies. Everything that comes from the Gaza Strip should be treated with extreme caution, and I think that's a wise practice for any source of information. I know that when we report something, we are scrutinized and we are asked to provide evidence for our claims, and that's right, that's how it should be. I think that too many times international media gives Hamas a free ride and doesn't hold them to half of the scrutiny that we and others have to go through.
And in terms of this war, there's of course the kinetic element, but as you mentioned, there's also the media element or the information war. Now we're seeing various reports, especially anti-Israel propaganda coming out of Hamas, Russia, and China. China's state-run media, CCTV, even put out a video claiming that Israel was decapitating the babies. Now, how seriously is the IDF taking this aspect of the war?
We're taking it very seriously, and you can see how serious we take it by how much we worked in order to get evidence out as fast as possible in order to debunk this Hamas fake about the hospital. We understand that the situation is volatile. We understand that information is used in order to create realities on the ground to stoke incitement and violence. We saw so-called spontaneous clashes in the streets of many Middle Eastern cities, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in other parts of Northern Africa. All of that allegedly in response of an event that was a fake event, which was used by Hamas and by our other enemies in order to create instability. I think that the aim of the Hamas fake here was to derail the visit of President Biden and to put everything in the context of humanitarian issues. I think that they failed at that, and I think that the statements made by President Biden are proof of their failure, and also, of course, of the statements by the National Security Council.
Now, there's been a lot of reports of how Iran is backing Hamas and these terrorist organizations. Do you know of any evidence of the Chinese Communist Party supporting Hamas through Iran?
We know of weapons that have been either purchased or provided. I do not know of direct intelligence or otherwise military operational links. Hamas has a lot of homegrown capabilities. They receive lots and lots of money from Iran. They receive standard grade weapons. Much of the weapons that we uncovered that Hamas terrorists took with them into Israel on the first attack that they did, some of that is standard grade weapons from Iran, from North Korea, and from other countries. So there's a mix here, but really the spider in the web is Iran. Had it not been for Iran, then Hamas wouldn't exist, wouldn't have the same military capabilities, wouldn't have the ability to conduct such a large-scale attack against Israel, and really all fingers and all eyes should be pointed at Iran. Had it not been for them, the Middle East would have been a much quieter, safer, and more prosperous place.
Now, President Biden did visit Israel today, and then he sent $100 million to Gaza on humanitarian grounds. How confident are you that that money won't end up in Hamas's hands?
Sadly, I am very skeptical of that. We will, of course, try, and hopefully authorities in Gaza that are not Hamas, UN organizations, etc., will do the same. But there is a long documented history of Hamas abusing civilian humanitarian aid for military purposes. They themselves have shown videos of them unearthing water pipes and using them to build rockets. All of the tunnels that Hamas has built, the tunnel network, the extensive tunnel network that exists underneath the Gaza Strip, was built using cement that was intended for civilian purposes. And the list goes on and on and on. The principle is the same. Hamas knows no boundaries, and it uses everything for its military purposes. We have said, if this aid will go to Hamas, if Hamas will take it, like they stole fuel from a UN facility a few days ago, and that was reported by the UN, if that happens, we'll destroy it, because we are not going to allow sustenance and the enhancement of military capabilities for our enemy.
And what about the hostages being held in Gaza? What is the IDF doing to try and rescue them?
We are collecting intelligence at all levels. We're pooling the resources that we have in the State of Israel, not only the IDF, but all of the other intelligence organizations that we have. There is a special national task force which directs the activities. We are collecting information, coming up with a plan, and we have said extremely clearly, we will not rest until all of them are brought back home. That is our commitment, that is our responsibility and duty.
And looking more broadly, are there limits to how long Israel can sustain this war?
Of course there are. And in any case, without going into limits and how long, etc., of course we aspire for a short, swift, and decisive war with the least amount of casualties in Israel for our troops, but also for civilians suffering in Gaza. They are not our enemy. So the faster and swifter that we can do it, the better. This could all be, of course, saved, and we could save lots of life if Hamas understood the severity of the situation, returned the hostages without conditions, and went out and surrendered unconditionally. That would save a lot of lives in Gaza, and it would save us the trouble of going in there and getting them. But that doesn't appear to be the state of affairs now with Hamas, which forces us to enhance our operations until, and this is our aim, we completely dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities.
Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.